Alright, welcome back to the channel, everybody. Appreciate you coming by. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. What we have for you today is I have two accounts, two classic accounts, one from 1971 in Oregon and another quick one from Maine in 1886. I'm going to show you the locations first and then we will go ahead and get into this. Okay, our first location is going to be on the border of Oregon and Washington, really close to Mount Hood, as you see there. Mount Hood is mentioned in the account, and the encounter happens down here by the Dales at the Pinewood Mobile Manor. Now in the account it says the office manager was at the office, which is right here, this building right here, tending his flowers, which is right there in the front, and he noticed a creature over here on this ledge. Now I'm going to put that in 3D for you really quick, and you guys can see this break in the ledge right there. That is where the creature goes up and down out of what they call the high meadow, and then down here is the low meadow. This used to be an apple orchard, according to the account. Okay, the second location is going to be in the northern part of Maine, by Moosehead Lake, but the account says it's about 100 miles north. So that's going to put it up here by the Allagash Wilderness Waterway. More precisely in this area right here. Now they don't give a lot of details as far as the location. It's from a newspaper article in the 1880s. So all I can do is really show you a general location of this area, but I'm going to show you a whole bunch of local images from this area in the video. Alright, now having showed you the locations, let's go ahead and get to these encounters. 1971, the Dales, Oregon. Believers theorize that he came down from Mount Hood, the 14,000-foot blizzard-shrouded peak just outside of Portland, Oregon. He was massive, standing nearly 9 feet tall and weighing all of 900 pounds. He strode down the wooded ridges north and east to the 7,000-foot level where the spring snow lay wet and heavy in forest 50 miles from the nearest road. At the 4,000-foot level, the thick coniferous forest thinned and the deep mountain gorges leveled out. It was late June 1971 and the lower rivers raged with the waters of the melting snowpack. At the 3,000-foot level, the first growths of Douglas fir and oak gave way to a few scrub oak, growing singly. From a high point on the ridge that runs down from Mount Hood called 7 Mile Hill, he could see the lights of the Dales, Oregon, where 11,000 people lived. 15 miles upriver, the YM Indians, roped to their platforms perched over the boiling river, netted spring Chinook salmon by the hundreds with their long poles. This they had done every spring since prehistory. The great food is what the YM called salmon, and perhaps he had come down to the semi-arid insecurity of the Dales to scramble on the banks of the river for the great food during one of the largest salmon runs on the North American continent. Some who theorize about him think that he came down to this narrow point in the river where there is little current because an island breaks the swim to Washington and the Cascade Ridge, where the deer and huckleberries are plentiful in the summer. Things had changed since he had last been down to the river. In the early daylight hours of this first day of June 1971, he stood in a small meadow above what had been a large foothill apple orchard. It was now filled with flat electrical platforms and called the Pinewood Mobile Manor. Joe Medeiros, maintenance man for the trailer court, was watering flowers near his trailer that morning. Directly across US 30 is a large fenced meadow. At about 150 yards, a rocky ledge of perhaps 35 feet banks a higher meadow. Medeiros caught a movement along the ledge from the corner of his eye. He assumed it was George Johnson, the owner of the land, and went back to watering his flowers. But his mind was engaged in a curious and unconscious arithmetic. He had seen Johnson on the land previously. It wasn't unusual, but this figure was too big. The arms were too long, the shoulders too broad. Medeiros turned to the ridge for a longer look. What he saw was a shaggy, gray figure he took to be at least 10 feet tall. It had an oval face and a crest or dorsal ridge along the top of its head. The face was flat, brown, and hairless. The man turned back to his flowers and considered his situation. He was responsible to some Portland businessmen who who would be down to the Dales the next day. If he were to report this sighting, there would be deputies and curiosity seekers tromping all over his carefully watered flowers about the time his bosses arrived. Medeiros later told Sheriff's Deputy Rich Carlson that he didn't report the incident for fear he'd be called a nut. The next day around noon, the three businessmen met Medeiros and were in the midst of the discussion in the trailer office fronting the meadow when Medeiros again saw an erect, ape-like figure through the window. The four men ran outside and watched from across the road as it moved through a break in the ridge and came into the lower meadow where it walked among the sparse scrub oak near the rocks. It stopped near a small tree, and from where the men stood, it appeared to be somewhat taller than the tree. The four men and the other creature stared at one another for perhaps a minute before it turned, went up through the bank in the rocks, and disappeared into the upper meadow. This time the sighting was reported and Deputy Carlson went out to investigate. Carlson's report said Mr. Medeiros described it as being about 10 feet tall, grayish in color, real wide shoulders and arms that hung way down. He went on to say that it looked like an overgrown ape. He stated it was not a bear. The creature was walking upright at the time of the sighting. The Portland men, solid citizens all, confirmed the sighting and the description. The same night, about 9:30, when the last summer light was fading in the meadow, a man named Rich Brown, a high school music teacher, and his wife were returning from a choir practice he had been conducting. At the entrance to the trailer court, Brown's wife either shouted or screamed and pointed to a figure in the lower meadow. Brown swung his car around and put the headlights stark into the meadow. He was joined by a second car and eventually Medeiros, who stepped out of the office to see why the cars were blocking the entrance. At a distance of about 65 yards, the creature froze and stared into the lights. Brown sprinted for his trailer, grabbed a Winchester 30-06 with a 4-power scope. He opened the car door and steadied the rifle. He considered a shot at the heart, then the head. With the scope crosshair squarely between the thing's expressionless, flat black eyes, he released the safety. Like any good marksman, Brown squeezes the trigger slowly. In the moment between the final squeeze and the shot, Rich Brown, who had just come from a church, made a complicated moral decision. I couldn't shoot it, he said later, because it looked more human than animal. Alright, so there it is, the 1971 Dales, Oregon Bigfoot encounter. 4 people saw this in broad daylight. More people saw it at night with their headlights. Back then in 1971, nobody was carrying around a camera like we do today. So, alright, let's get on to this next one in Maine. It's from a newspaper article in 1886. So let's go ahead and get to it. In the same month, the Statue of Liberty was dedicated in New York in 1886. A handful of newspapers in New England published stories about a deadly encounter in the Maine woods involving what today likely would be termed Bigfoot or Sasquatch. The story of the 10-foot wild man with 7-foot-long arms and hair growing all over his face and body was reported in broad sheets of the time after first gracing the pages of the Waterville Sentinel, a weekly paper that no longer exists. Tales of these seldom-seen, mysterious ape-like beasts are found in Maine folklore, according to experts, but they are more prevalent in California, Washington, and Oregon. The main story starts in early October 1886 when an affrighted Frenchman from over the line arrived in the Elm City to weave a frightening tale of woe. The Frenchman's story, which is implicitly believed, is that 3 men were camping out in the woods about 100 miles north of Moosehead Lake. The 127-year-old newspaper article states 2 of the campers were away from the camp for a week and came back to find the dead body of their companion. The unnamed storyteller, possibly a Canadian, had his fellows in town all by the ears with the story about the giant wild man he encountered in the dense woods above Moosehead, according to the papers. When he and the other camper discovered their friend was dead, they searched out others to form a posse to find his killer. They went for help and, reinforced by a dozen others, searched the woods for the unknown murderer. It proved to be a terrible wild man, 10 feet tall with arms 7 feet in length, covered with long brown hair. The party fired several shots at him and finally succeeded in reaching a fatal spot, laying the monster low. Alright, so there it is. 2 encounters, one from Oregon in 1971 and another one from 1886 in northern Maine. And if you think about Maine, Maine is one of the most heavily forested states in America, if not the most. Especially when you get up to northern Maine, there's really nothing up there towards the Canadian border. So actually, I'm pretty surprised there's not more encounters up there. Maybe people just don't really go in that area so much, I'm not too sure. So I gotta give a special thanks to Dreamtime Relaxation. Dreamtime Relaxation for my last 2 videos has left me a super thanks, and it's really appreciated. I really thank you very much for that. And if you guys ever want to give a super thanks, it's right below the video, right next to the like and all that. You just hit super thanks and then you can follow the prompts, and I really do appreciate it. Do not ever feel like you need to or you have to, nothing like that, but if you want to, it's there for you to use if you like. That's where we're going to go ahead and leave this one. If you guys like the video, make sure you hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. What are you waiting for? There's always new videos coming out, and I'm always going to show you the locations to the best of my ability. Until next time, always remember, where there is a Willstar, there is definitely a way. Willstar out.